I never thought moving to Meadowbrook, Colorado would turn me into a man who spent his nights reviewing security footage like some kind of amateur detective. But here I was, watching a middle-aged woman in a puffy winter coat launch snowballs at my bedroom window at 2 in the morning. My name is Vance, and I bought my first house 6 months ago in what I thought was a peaceful neighborhood just outside Denver. The place was perfect. A 3-bedroom ranch with a nice yard, good bones, and reasonable HOA fees. What the real estate agent failed to mention was that the homeowners association president, Karren Whitmore, lived directly across the street and had apparently appointed herself the moral guardian of our entire cul-de-sac. The snowball incident started in early December, right after our first real snowfall of the season. I woke up around 1 in the morning to a loud thump against my bedroom window. Half asleep, I figured maybe a branch had fallen or some animal had knocked something over. Then it happened again. And again. 3 distinct thuds against the glass, each one harder than the last. I stumbled out of bed and pulled back the curtains, but saw nothing except pristine white snow glowing under the streetlights. The temperature gauge on my window frame read 12 degrees. Nobody in their right mind would be outside in this weather, I thought. I chalked it up to ice falling from the roof and went back to bed, though sleep came reluctantly. The next night it happened again. Same time, same pattern. 3 heavy impacts against my window, spaced about 30 seconds apart. This time I was faster, throwing open the curtains immediately after the second hit, just in time to see a dark figure hurrying across the street. The person moved quickly despite the icy conditions, disappearing between 2 houses before I could make out any details. I stood there in my boxers and t-shirt, breath fogging the cold glass, trying to process what I had just witnessed. Someone was deliberately throwing something at my window in the middle of the night. But why? I had barely met any of my neighbors. I kept to myself, went to work at the software company downtown, came home, and minded my own business. I had not hosted any loud parties or left my trash cans out past collection day. I could not think of a single reason why anyone would target me. The third night, I was ready. I set my alarm for 12:30 and positioned myself in a chair by the window with the lights off. Sure enough, at 1:07 a.m., I saw movement across the street. A figure emerged from the house directly opposite mine, bundled in a dark coat with a hood pulled up. They crossed the street quickly, stopped about 20 feet from my window, wound up like a baseball pitcher, and launched something that hit my window with a solid thunk. Before I could react, they threw 2 more in rapid succession. I jumped up and fumbled with my phone, trying to turn on the flashlight, but by the time I got it working and pointed it outside, the person was already gone. I had missed my chance to identify them, but at least now I knew for certain this was not my imagination or some natural phenomenon. Someone was actively harassing me. The next morning I walked outside to inspect the area below my window. There, half buried in the snow, I found evidence. 3 perfectly round snowballs, packed tight and hard as rocks. These were not casual tosses. Someone had spent time crafting these projectiles to maximize impact. I looked across the street at the house where I had seen the figure emerge. It was a well-maintained 2-story colonial with burgundy shutters and an elaborate holiday light display that was still up despite it being mid-January. A silver Lexus SUV sat in the driveway with a custom license plate that read HOA PRZ. My stomach sank. The HOA president lived right across from me. This complicated things significantly. I had received exactly 1 piece of communication from the Meadowbrook HOA since moving in. A welcome packet that included a dense 40-page booklet of rules and regulations. I had skimmed it, noting the usual restrictions on fence heights, approved exterior paint colors, and lawn maintenance requirements. There was also a letter from Karren Whitmore introducing herself and emphasizing the importance of maintaining property values and neighborhood standards. The letter had concluded with a request that all new homeowners schedule a compliance review within their first 60 days. I had put off scheduling that review, mainly because I was busy with work and saw no urgent need. My house looked fine. The previous owners had maintained it well, and I had not made any changes that would violate HOA rules. But apparently, this oversight had put me on someone's bad side. After finding the Snowballs, I decided to be proactive. I looked up the HOA contact information and called the number listed for Karren Whitmore. She answered on the second ring with a crisp, professional tone. Meadowbrook HOA, Karren speaking. Hi Karren, this is Vance. I live at 447 Pinewood Circle, right across from you actually. There was a pause. Yes, I know who you are, Mr. Vance. How can I help you? Her tone had shifted slightly, becoming cooler. I pressed on anyway. I wanted to report something strange. Someone has been throwing snowballs at my bedroom window in the middle of the night. 3 nights in a row now. I was wondering if you had heard about anyone else experiencing this kind of harassment. Another pause, longer this time. Snowballs at your window. Yes, between 1 and 2 in the morning. Hard-packed snowballs, it's been waking me up. Mr. Vance, have you scheduled your new homeowner compliance review yet? The question caught me off guard. No, I have not gotten around to it. But I do not think that is related to the compliance review is mandatory within 60 days of purchase. According to our records, you closed on your property on August 15th. It is now January 17th. You are significantly overdue. Okay, I understand, but right now I am more concerned about someone harassing me. Do you have any idea who might be doing this? Mr. Vance, if you are experiencing issues, perhaps it is because you have not properly integrated into our community. Homeowners who ignore HOA procedures often find that their neighbors are less welcoming. I suggest you schedule that compliance review immediately. I have an opening this Saturday at 9 a.m. I felt anger rising in my chest. Are you suggesting that because I did not schedule some review, I deserve to have snowballs thrown at my window in the middle of the night? I am suggesting that actions have consequences. Good day, Mr. Vance. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there holding my phone, stunned by the conversation. The implication was clear. She knew about the snowballs, and this was some kind of punishment for my administrative oversight. That night, the snowball attacks intensified. Instead of 3, I counted 7 impacts against my window between 1 and 3 in the morning. I tried to catch the person in the act again, but they were smart about timing, waiting until I moved away from the window to launch the next volley. By morning, I was exhausted and furious. I spent my lunch break that day researching my options. Technically, throwing objects at someone's house could constitute harassment or vandalism, but without proof of who was doing it, I had no case. My word against whoever was responsible would not hold up, especially if that person was the HOA president with standing in the community. I needed evidence. That afternoon, I ordered 2 outdoor security cameras on expedited shipping. They were decent quality but not outrageously expensive, with night vision capability and motion detection. They would record directly to cloud storage, so even if someone tampered with them, I would have the footage. While I waited for the cameras to arrive, the attacks continued. Every night like clockwork, sometimes once per night, sometimes multiple times. The thuds against my window became the soundtrack of my winter. I started sleeping with earplugs, but I could still feel the vibrations through the walls. My work performance started to suffer from lack of sleep. Dark circles formed under my eyes. Colleagues asked if I was feeling okay. The cameras arrived on a Wednesday. I installed them that afternoon, mounting one above my garage pointing toward the front yard and driveway, and another on the side of the house specifically angled to cover my bedroom window. Both had clear views of the street and the houses opposite. If Karren or anyone else came over to throw snowballs, I would have them on video. I did not have to wait long. That very night at 1:23 a.m., my phone buzzed with a motion detection alert. I grabbed it and opened the security app, watching the live feed as a hooded figure crossed the street from the house opposite mine. The night vision made everything appear in shades of green and gray, but the image was clear enough. The figure stopped in my front yard, reached down to scoop and pack snow, then hurled it at my window. The camera captured everything: the wind-up, the throw, the impact. The figure threw 4 more snowballs in quick succession, then turned and walked back across the street. As she reached the pool of light from a street lamp, her hood fell back slightly, and I got a clear view of her face. Karren Whitmore, no doubt about it. The HOA president was personally conducting a harassment campaign against me. I saved the video and went back to sleep, feeling a grim satisfaction. I had evidence now. The question was what to do with it. The next morning, I reviewed the footage again to make sure it was clear enough. Karren's face was visible for about 3 seconds as she walked back across the street, enough for anyone to make a positive identification. The angle and distance were perfect. This was exactly what I needed. I had several options. I could confront Karren directly, show her the footage, and demand she stop. I could file a complaint with the HOA board, though given that she was the president, that seemed unlikely to go anywhere. Or I could go to the police and file a formal harassment complaint. The mature, rational part of me wanted to try the direct approach first. Maybe if Karren knew she was being recorded, she would stop, and we could all move on with our lives. But another part of me, the part that had been sleep-deprived and stressed for weeks, wanted justice. This woman had been tormenting me for her own petty reasons, and she deserved consequences. Before I could decide, I got another piece of mail from the HOA. This one was a formal violation notice. According to Karren, my house was in violation of Section 7.3.2 of the HOA bylaws regarding exterior holiday decorations. Specifically, I had failed to remove my Christmas wreath from my front door within the allowed time frame. The deadline had been January 10th. It was now January 24th. The notice included a fine of $50, escalating to $100 if not remedied within 5 business days. I walked to my front door and looked at the wreath. It was a simple pine wreath with a red bow, nothing ostentatious. I had honestly forgotten it was there. But apparently this oversight was worthy of a fine. I looked across the street at Karren's house. Her elaborate Christmas light display was still fully operational, visible in broad daylight. Strings of lights covered every eave and window. Illuminated reindeer grazed on her lawn. A massive Santa in a sleigh dominated her roof. According to the same rule she was citing to fine me, all of that should have been taken down by January 10th too. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I took photos of her house with my phone, documenting every bit of holiday decoration still on display. Then I took down my wreath and tossed it in the recycling bin. But I was done trying to handle this diplomatically. Karren wanted to play games. I would show her I could play too. I spent that evening preparing a comprehensive complaint document. I included screenshots from the security footage showing Karren throwing snowballs at my house. complete with timestamps. I included photos of her violation of the same holiday decoration rule she had cited to fine me. I wrote a detailed timeline of every incident, starting with my first night being awakened and going through that morning's violation notice. Then, I made several copies. One went to every member of the HOA board, whose contact information I could find in the welcome packet. Another went to the management company that handled HOA administrative tasks. And one more went to the Colorado Springs Police Department as a formal harassment complaint. The response was swift and dramatic. 2 days later, I got a phone call from a Detective Morris with the local police department. He wanted to meet with me to discuss my complaint. We arranged to meet at my house that evening. Detective Morris turned out to be a tired-looking man in his 50s with graying hair and a no-nonsense attitude. I invited him in and showed him the security footage on my TV, streaming it from the cloud storage. He watched silently as Karren repeatedly appeared on camera, throwing snowballs at my window across multiple nights. I had compiled the clearest footage into a highlight reel of sorts, about 10 minutes of undeniable evidence. "How long has this been going on?" Detective Morris asked. "Since early December. Almost every night for about 7 weeks now, sometimes multiple times per night. And you know this woman. She is your neighbor. She is the HOA president, lives right across the street. I think this is retaliation because I did not schedule some mandatory new homeowner meeting with her." Detective Morris nodded slowly. "And she has actually damaged your property. Is the window cracked or anything?" "No physical damage that I can see, but the psychological impact has been significant. I am not sleeping. It is affecting my work, and she is doing this intentionally to harass me. The thing is, Mr. Vance, without property damage, this is a bit tricky. Throwing snowballs is not exactly a serious crime. Some prosecutors might view this as a neighborhood dispute, not worth pursuing." My heart sank. "So she can just keep doing this?" "I did not say that. What we have here is pretty clear evidence of harassment. Multiple incidents, deliberate targeting, a pattern of behavior. That is criminal harassment under Colorado law. Plus, depending on the DA's mood, we might be able to argue stalking, given the late hours and the targeted nature. But I want to be upfront with you. This is probably going to result in misdemeanor charges at most. I do not care about the level of charges. I just want it to stop. Then let me talk to her. Sometimes an official police visit is enough to scare people straight. If she is smart, she will apologize and never bother you again. If she is not smart, we will have grounds to arrest her if it continues." "There is one more thing," I said. "She is abusing her position as HOA president to fine me for violations she is guilty of herself. I documented it." I showed him the photos of Karren's house still covered in Christmas decorations. Detective Morris studied the photos and chuckled. "Yeah, that is not a crime, just makes her a hypocrite, but it does show a pattern of targeted harassment. Mind if I keep these? Please do." Detective Morris visited Karren the next day. I know because I watched the whole thing on my security camera. He parked in front of her house around 10 in the morning and rang her doorbell. She answered in a pink velour tracksuit, and I could see her posture stiffen when she saw his badge. They talked on her porch for about 10 minutes. I could not hear the conversation, but her body language went from defensive to agitated to defeated as the conversation progressed. After Detective Morris left, Karren went back inside, and I did not see her for the rest of the day. That night, for the first time in 7 weeks, no snowballs hit my window. I slept through the night and woke up feeling like a new person. I thought that would be the end of it. Detective Morris had scared her off, and she would leave me alone from now on. But I had underestimated Karren's petness, and her willingness to abuse her power. 3 days after the police visit, I received a notice that the HOA board would be holding a special hearing regarding multiple violations and homeowner conduct at my property. The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday evening at 7 p.m. in the community clubhouse. My attendance was mandatory. I called the management company to ask what this was about. The woman I spoke with, Linda, was apologetic but not particularly helpful. "I am sorry, Mr. Vance, but Mrs. Whitmore has filed several complaints about your property. The board needs to review them in a formal hearing. That is standard procedure." "What complaints? The wreath is gone. What else could she possibly be citing?" "I do not have all the details, but I believe there are concerns about unauthorized cameras, property maintenance issues, and failure to complete the new homeowner compliance review." Unauthorized cameras. I am allowed to put security cameras on my own house. "You will have a chance to address all of this at the hearing. I really do recommend you attend." I hung up feeling that familiar anger rising again. Karren was retaliating for my police complaint by weaponizing the HOA against me, but two could play at that game. I spent the week before the hearing doing my own research into HOA law in Colorado and documenting everything about my property. The community clubhouse was a modest building at the entrance to our neighborhood, with a meeting room that could seat about 30 people. When I arrived on Thursday evening, I found 7 people already there. Karren and 6 other board members, all seated at a long table at the front of the room like judges. A handful of other neighbors sat in the audience seats, apparently there to watch the show. Karren called the meeting to order with officious formality. "This special hearing of the Meadowbrook HOA board is now in session. We are here to address multiple violations by the homeowner at 447 Pinewood Circle, Mr. Isaac Vance." She looked at me with cold satisfaction. "Mr. Vance, you are accused of the following violations. First, installation of unauthorized security equipment without Architectural Review Committee approval. Second, failure to maintain proper snow removal from your walkway within the required 24-hour period following snowfall. Third, improper trash can placement. Fourth, failure to complete mandatory new homeowner compliance review. How do you respond?" I took a breath to keep my voice steady. "I respond that these charges are retaliatory harassment and I have evidence to prove it." Karren's eyes narrowed. "You are here to answer charges, not make accusations. With respect, I think the board should know why these charges are being filed now, all at once, after months of me living here with no issues." One of the other board members, an older man with white hair, spoke up. "Let him talk, Karren. I want to hear what he has to say." Karren looked annoyed but gestured for me to continue. I pulled out my laptop and a portable projector I had brought. "May I?" The white-haired board member nodded. "Please do." I set up the projector to display on the wall behind the board table. Then I opened my compiled evidence folder and started with the security footage. The room fell silent as everyone watched Karren, clearly identifiable, throwing snowballs at my house. I showed clips from 6 different nights, each with clear timestamps. This has been happening since December. Multiple times per week, sometimes multiple times per night. The HOA president has been conducting a campaign of harassment against me because I did not schedule a compliance review meeting fast enough for her liking. I could see the other board members exchanging glances. Karren's face had gone red. "Those videos are edited," Karren said. "They could show anything. They are time-stamped and stored in tamper-proof cloud storage. I also filed a police report and provided this footage to Detective Morris of the Colorado Springs Police Department. He visited you about it last week. Do you deny that?" Karren said nothing. The white-haired board member leaned forward. "Karren, is this true? Have you been throwing snowballs at his house?" I was concerned about his property. I was checking his windows for damage because he had not done a compliance review. I thought they might be compromised structurally. The excuse was so absurd that one of the other board members actually laughed out loud. By throwing snowballs at them at 2 in the morning. I pressed my advantage. Now let me address the violations I am supposedly being charged with. First, security cameras. I installed them on my own property. I checked the HOA bylaws thoroughly. Section 12.4 requires architectural review for structures and modifications that alter the appearance of the property. My cameras are small, discreet, and mounted in locations barely visible from the street. Similar cameras are installed on at least 4 other houses in this neighborhood, including the house directly next to mine. None of those homeowners were required to get architectural approval. I showed photos I had taken of other houses with visible security cameras. Second, snow removal. I am accused of failing to clear my walkway within 24 hours. Here are photos of my walkway taken within 12 hours of our last snowfall. It was completely clear. I showed the photos, date and time stamped. Meanwhile, here are photos of the HOA president's walkway taken at the same time. Karren's walkway was covered in several inches of packed snow. Double standard. I went through each charge methodically, showing that either I had not actually violated the rule, or that Karren herself was violating the same rule she was accusing me of breaking. The other board members looked increasingly uncomfortable. The white-haired man finally held up his hand. "That is enough. Karren, I think we need to have a private board discussion. Mr. Vance, would you step outside for a few minutes?" I gathered my laptop and went out into the hallway. I could hear raised voices through the door but could not make out specific words. After about 15 minutes, the door opened and the white-haired man gestured me back in. Karren was no longer sitting at the board table. She stood off to the side, arms crossed, looking furious. "Mr. Vance, this board has reviewed the evidence you presented. All charges against you are dismissed. Furthermore, effective immediately, Karren Whitmore has been removed from her position as HOA president pending an internal review. We apologize for this situation and any stress it has caused you." Relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by concern as I saw Karren's expression. If looks could kill, I would have dropped dead on the spot. "This is ridiculous," Karren said. "I have served this community for 8 years. I have kept property values stable. I have enforced the rules that keep this neighborhood respectable. And you are going to throw me out because of some snowballs." "It is not just snowballs, Karren," the white-haired man said. "It is harassment, abuse of your position, and selective enforcement of rules. We have had other complaints about your behavior that we have overlooked in the past, but this is beyond the pale. You need to step down." "I will not. You cannot make me." "We can, actually. According to our bylaws, a majority vote of the board can remove any officer for cause. We just took that vote. You are out." Karren grabbed her purse and stormed out of the clubhouse, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. The remaining board members all looked exhausted. "I am really sorry about all this," the white-haired man said to me. His name was Robert Chen, and I later learned he was a retired lawyer. Karren has been, well, difficult for a while now, but she was effective at managing the administrative side of things, so we let it slide. We should not have. "I appreciate you taking this seriously," I said. "I just want to live in peace." "You will. And again, our apologies." I went home that night feeling vindicated but uneasy. I had won this round, but I knew from Karren's reaction that this was not over. She was not the type to accept defeat gracefully. Sure enough, the snowball attacks resumed that very night. 3 hard impacts against my window at 1:47 a.m. My cameras caught everything. Karren was being even less subtle than before, not even bothering with a hood. She walked right up to my yard, threw her snowballs, and walked back. It was like she wanted to be seen. The next morning, I downloaded the footage and emailed it to Detective Morris with a simple message. It is still happening. She was removed as HOA president last night and immediately retaliated. Detective Morris called me an hour later. I am sorry, Mr. Vance. I really thought she would have more sense. Let me go talk to her again, and this time I will make it clear that we are moving toward an arrest if this continues. Please do whatever you need to do. I am exhausted. He visited Karren again that afternoon. I watched on my camera as he stood on her porch, and this time the conversation looked more intense. He pointed at my house several times, presumably referencing the footage. Karren was animated, gesturing wildly. At one point, she actually poked Detective Morris in the chest, which seemed to surprise him. The conversation ended with him handing her some kind of document and walking back to his car. Karren tore up the paper and threw the pieces on her lawn. Detective Morris called me shortly after. Mr. Vance, I served her with a formal warning. If she contacts you or comes onto your property again, she will be arrested. I made that very clear to her. Did you see her tear up the warning? I did. That is going in my report. If she does not take this seriously, that will work against her in court. Thank you, Detective. That night passed peacefully. So did the next night. I started to relax, thinking maybe the threat of arrest had finally gotten through to her. I should have known better. On the third night, at exactly 2 a.m., I was jolted awake by an enormous crash. Not the thud of a snowball, but the actual sound of breaking glass. I jumped out of bed and saw that my bedroom window was shattered, with a large rock sitting in the middle of the floor surrounded by glass shards and snow. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone and called 911. While I waited for the police, I checked my security footage. There was Karren, clear as day, winding up and hurling a rock through my window. She had escalated from snowballs to actual vandalism. 2 patrol officers arrived within 10 minutes, followed shortly by Detective Morris, who apparently lived close by and heard the call on his scanner. They took photos of the broken window and the rock, and I showed them the security footage. That is property damage now, Detective Morris said. Clearly intentional, clearly her. Mr. Vance, I am really sorry it came to this, but I am going to go arrest her right now. Now. It is 2:30 in the morning. She threw a rock through your window at 2 in the morning. Seems appropriate to me. I watched from my broken window as Detective Morris and the 2 patrol officers crossed the street and rang Karren's doorbell. It took a while for her to answer. When she finally opened the door in a bathrobe, looking disheveled, they had a brief conversation before one of the officers pulled out handcuffs. Karren tried to pull away, but they cuffed her anyway and led her to the patrol car. She was yelling something I could not quite hear, but her rage was evident even from across the street. As the patrol car drove away with Karren in the back seat, Detective Morris came back over to my house. She is being charged with criminal mischief, harassment, and stalking. I am also going to recommend the DA pursue this aggressively given the pattern of behavior and the fact that she ignored multiple warnings. What happens now? She will be booked and arraigned tomorrow. Depending on bail, she might be out by tomorrow afternoon. But she will have a restraining order filed against her, and if she comes near you or your property again, she goes right back to jail. Thank you. Really. After the police left, I spent the rest of the night cleaning up glass and taping a tarp over my broken window. I was running on adrenaline, too wired to sleep, despite my exhaustion. As the sun came up, I sat on my couch drinking coffee and marveling at how completely insane my life had become. My phone rang around 8 a.m. It was Robert Chen from the HOA board. "Mr. Vance, I heard about what happened last night. Are you okay?" "I am fine. Window is broken, but I am fine." "I am so sorry. I never imagined Karren would take things this far. The board is going to cover your window repair, and we are terminating her HOA membership entirely. She will also be getting a bill for legal fees related to this situation." "That is generous, thank you. It is the least we can do. You should not have had to deal with any of this." Karren's arraignment was set for 10 a.m. that morning. I did not attend, but Detective Morris called me afterward to fill me in. She pled not guilty and got bail set at $5,000. She posted it immediately, but the judge granted a temporary restraining order requiring her to stay at least 500 feet from you and your property. That basically means she cannot go to her own house, since it is right across the street. Where will she go? Not my problem. She has got friends or family, I assume. The point is, you do not have to worry about her bothering you anymore. If she violates the restraining order, she goes straight to jail, no bail. Over the next few days, I learned more about Karren's situation through the neighborhood grapevine. Turned out she was not nearly as popular as she thought she was. Multiple neighbors came forward with their own stories of her bullying, selective rule enforcement, and petty tyranny. One family had been fined repeatedly for having a vegetable garden in their backyard, even though it was not visible from the street and violated no actual rule. Another homeowner had been harassed for parking a work van in his driveway overnight, despite the fact that it was a small van, and the bylaws only restricted commercial trucks. The HOA board opened an investigation into Karren's tenure as president and discovered financial irregularities. She had apparently been using HOA funds for personal expenses, including landscaping for her own yard that she had billed as common area maintenance. The amounts were not huge, maybe $3,000 total, but it was clear embezzlement. With each new revelation, the criminal case against Karren got stronger. The DA assigned to prosecute her, a woman named Deborah Carson, called me to discuss my willingness to testify. "Mr. Vance, I want to pursue this case fully. What Mrs. Whitmore did to you is completely unacceptable, and based on what we are finding about her HOA activities, she has been abusing her position for years. But I need you to be willing to testify in court about the harassment, the snowballs, everything." "I will testify, I want to." "Good." Be prepared for her lawyer to try to paint you as oversensitive or vindictive. They will argue that snowballs are just a prank, that you escalated by installing cameras, that sort of thing. I have months of documentation and video evidence. Let them try. The trial was set for April, giving everyone time to prepare. In the meantime, I got my window repaired, courtesy of the HOA, and life started to return to normal. Karren was apparently staying with her sister in Denver, about 40 minutes away. I saw her husband a few times, a meek-looking man who always hurried to his car without making eye contact with anyone. I felt bad for him. Being married to Karren could not have been easy. Winter gave way to early spring. The snow melted, revealing the brown grass and detritus underneath. I spent my weekends working on my yard, planting flower beds, and actually getting to know my neighbors properly. Most of them were friendly, normal people who had been just as intimidated by Karren as I was. One neighbor, an elderly woman named Margaret who lived 2 doors down, brought me cookies one afternoon and apologized for not speaking up during my HOA hearing. "I wanted to say something," she said. "I have seen how Karren treats people, but I was afraid she would turn on me next. "I am ashamed of that. Do not be," I told her. "I understand. She had power and she used it to keep people scared." "Well, you were brave. You stood up to her. The neighborhood is better off without her running things." The trial began on a rainy Tuesday in April. The courthouse in Colorado Springs was a modern building with tight security. I arrived early and met with Deborah Carson to go over my testimony one more time. "Just tell the truth," she said. "Walk the jury through the timeline, explain how it affected you, and let the videos speak for themselves. You are a credible witness with strong evidence. We are in good shape." Karren's lawyer was a slick-looking man named Gregory Walsh who specialized in defending white-collar criminals. He had apparently convinced Karren to take a plea deal, but she refused, insisting on going to trial. She genuinely seemed to believe she had done nothing wrong. The prosecution's case was straightforward. Deborah Carson walked the jury through the timeline, starting with my first night being awakened by snowballs, and continuing through the escalation to the rock through my window. She played the security footage, which was damning. You could see Karren's face clearly in multiple clips. There was no question about who was responsible. When it was my turn to testify, I tried to stay calm and factual. I explained how the harassment had affected my sleep, my work, and my mental health. I talked about my confusion at being targeted when I had done nothing to provoke Karren except fail to schedule a meeting promptly. Gregory Walsh's cross-examination was predictably aggressive. He tried to paint me as overly sensitive, suggesting that snowballs were harmless fun. He insinuated that I had installed cameras specifically to trap his client rather than to protect myself. "Mr. Vance, is not it true that you could have simply talked to Mrs. Whitmore about your concerns instead of immediately installing surveillance equipment?" "I did talk to her. I called her and asked if she knew who was throwing snowballs at my house. She basically told me I deserved it for not scheduling a compliance review." "You claim she said that, but you did not record the conversation, did you?" "No. I did not think I needed to record a phone call with my HOA president." "And these cameras, they were high-end equipment, were they not? Rather expensive for someone supposedly just trying to feel safe." "They cost about $300 total. I do not consider that high-end. But you knew where to point them. You knew to angle them to capture Mrs. Whitmore's house." "I pointed them to capture my property and the area where someone was throwing things at my house." "Yes, that happened to include a view of the street and the houses across from me. That is how cameras work." Walsh kept pushing, but he did not have much to work with. The evidence was too clear. After my testimony, the prosecution called Detective Morris, who walked the jury through his investigation and his attempts to warn Karren before the situation escalated. They also called Robert Chen, who testified about the HOA hearing and Karren's abuse of power. Karren herself did not testify, probably on her lawyer's advice, but the prosecution entered her written statement to police, in which she had claimed she was checking the structural integrity of the window by throwing snowballs at it. The jury laughed when that was read aloud. It was obviously absurd. The defense's case was weak. Walsh called a few character witnesses who testified that Karren was usually a good neighbor and an effective HOA president, but none of them could explain or justify her behavior toward me. One witness, a woman named Patricia, actually helped the prosecution by admitting under cross-examination that Karren could be a bit controlling and did not like when people questioned her authority. In his closing argument, Gregory Walsh tried to minimize the severity of the harassment. He called it a neighborhood dispute that got out of hand and suggested that I was vindictive for pressing charges. He argued that Karren had already lost her position as HOA president and faced civil liability for the embezzlement, and that criminal charges were overkill. Deborah Carson's closing was powerful. She reminded the jury that Karren had been given multiple chances to stop. She had been warned by Detective Morris. She had been removed from her HOA position. And still, she escalated to throwing a rock through my window. "This is not a neighborhood dispute," Karson said. "This is stalking and harassment by someone who believed she was above the rules she enforced on others. Mr. Vance did nothing wrong except fail to schedule a meeting. For that minor oversight, he was subjected to months of sleep deprivation and psychological torture, culminating in criminal property damage. That is not acceptable in our community, and it cannot be excused." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found Karren guilty on all counts: harassment, stalking, and criminal mischief. Her sentencing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. At the sentencing hearing, the judge was not sympathetic. Karren tried to give a statement claiming she had been unfairly targeted by a vindictive new resident, but the judge cut her off. "Mrs. Whitmore, I have reviewed the evidence in this case thoroughly. The video footage alone is damning, and your continued denial of responsibility is troubling. You were in a position of authority in your community, and you abused that authority to torment someone who had done nothing to deserve it. When law enforcement tried to intervene, you ignored them. You showed no remorse and no willingness to change your behavior. That demonstrates a concerning lack of judgment and empathy." The judge sentenced Karren to 90 days in county jail for the stalking and criminal mischief charges, plus a suspended sentence of 1 year for the harassment charge, meaning she would not have to serve that time unless she committed another crime within a year. She also had to pay restitution to me for the broken window and the cost of installing the security cameras, plus a fine of $5,000. Finally, the judge issued a permanent restraining order requiring Karren to stay at least 1,000 feet from me at all times. "That means you cannot return to your home, Mrs. Whitmore," the judge said. "You will need to sell the property or make other arrangements." Karren looked stunned. I think she had expected a slap on the wrist, maybe probation and a fine. Actual jail time had not been on her radar. As the bailiff led her away, she turned and gave me one last hateful glare. Even facing jail, she still blamed me for her situation rather than taking responsibility for her own actions. I left the courthouse feeling vindicated but also exhausted. The whole ordeal had consumed months of my life. I was ready to move on. The HOA board officially expelled Karren from membership and filed a civil suit to recover the embezzled funds. Her husband quietly put their house on the market and moved out. I heard through the grapevine that they were getting divorced. Apparently, the arrest and trial had been the final straw in what was already a troubled marriage. A nice young couple with a baby bought Karren's house in June. They introduced themselves to me on their first day moving in, and I welcomed them to the neighborhood without mentioning the previous owner's history. They did not need to know. That chapter was closed. Robert Chen remained as interim HOA president and implemented significant reforms. The board voted to limit the president's authority, require approval from at least 2 board members before issuing fines, and establish an appeals process for homeowners who felt they were being unfairly targeted. They also hired an independent management company to handle finances, removing the temptation for anyone to embezzle. My life returned to normal. I slept through the night without fear of being awakened by projectiles. I went to work refreshed and productive. I spent weekends working on my house and hanging out with neighbors who had become genuine friends. The security cameras stayed up, more out of habit than necessity, but now they just recorded the occasional dog walker or delivery person. One evening in late summer, I was grilling in my backyard when Margaret came over with a bottle of wine. "I thought you might like some company," she said, "and I wanted to thank you again for what you did." "You do not need to thank me, Margaret. I was just defending myself." "You did more than that. You exposed someone who had been bullying this neighborhood for years. Since Karren left, it is like a weight has been lifted. People actually talk to each other now. Kids play in the streets. It feels like a real community." I poured us both a glass of wine. "I am glad something good came out of it. There were times I thought about just dropping it, letting it go. The stress was not worth it. But you did not. You stood your ground. That took courage." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set behind the mountains. It was peaceful in a way I had not experienced since moving in. No dread of nighttime harassment. No anxiety about HOA violations. Just a quiet evening in my own home. Karren served her full 90 days in county jail with no early release. I know because Detective Morris called to let me know when she was being released and to remind me that the restraining order was still in effect. If I saw her anywhere near me, I was to call 911 immediately, but I never saw her again. I heard she moved to Arizona after her release, far from Colorado and the neighborhood where her reputation was destroyed. Her ex-husband apparently stayed in the Denver area, but kept a low profile. The civil suit the HOA filed against her was settled out of court. She paid back the embezzled funds plus damages, though I heard it wiped out most of her savings. Justice had been served, even if it came at a high cost for everyone involved. Looking back on the whole experience, I learned some valuable lessons. First, document everything. Without those security cameras, I would have had no case, and Karren would likely still be harassing me. Second, do not be afraid to involve authorities when someone is breaking the law, even if they are in a position of power. Detective Morris was professional and helpful throughout the process. Third, there are more good people than bad ones, even when it does not feel like it. My neighbors ultimately supported me and were relieved to see Karren held accountable. I also learned something about HOAs specifically. They can be a force for good, maintaining property values and community standards. But they can also be vehicles for petty tyrants to exercise power over others. The key is oversight, transparency, and accountability. The reforms Robert Chen implemented made our HOA much healthier and more functional. The whole situation could have been avoided if Karren had just been reasonable. If she had accepted my apology for missing the compliance review deadline and moved on. If she had responded professionally when I called to report the harassment. If she had stopped when Detective Morris first warned her. But at each decision point, she chose escalation over de-escalation, control over compromise. Some people cannot handle power, even the small amount that comes with being an HOA president. It goes to their head, and they start seeing themselves as judge and jury over their neighbors. Karren was one of those people, and ultimately it destroyed her life. As for me, I am still in my house on Pinewood Circle. It is truly home now, not just a piece of property I own. I know my neighbors. I participate in the HOA, serving on the Architectural Review Committee to make sure no one else abuses that process. I have made peace with the trauma of those winter months, though I still keep the security cameras running, just in case. Every now and then, when it snows, I look out my bedroom window and remember the sound of snowballs hitting the glass. But now it is just a memory, a crazy story I tell at parties when people ask why I have so many security cameras. The nightmare is over, and the woman who caused it is paying the price for her actions. Winter in Colorado is beautiful when you can enjoy it without fear. The snow that once carried harassment now just carries the promise of a good ski season. The quiet nights are peaceful, not anxious. My house is my sanctuary again, as it should have been from the start. I never did complete that mandatory new homeowner compliance review with Karren. The board waived the requirement entirely after everything that happened, calling it a goodwill gesture. I like to think it is more than that. It is an acknowledgement that some rules are not worth enforcing, and some procedures do more harm than good when applied rigidly. Life is good now. I have a home I love in a community that has learned from its mistakes. Karren Whitmore is gone, and good riddance. The only rocks hitting my windows these days are the ones kicked up by the occasional lawn mower, and I am perfectly fine with that. Sometimes at night, when I am lying in bed reading before sleep, I will hear a noise outside and tense up for just a moment. Old habits die hard. But then I remember, she is gone. The restraining order is permanent. The nightmare is over. And I can finally sleep peacefully in my own home, the way everyone deserves to. That is my story. A story about snowballs, security cameras, and standing up to a bully who thought she was untouchable. It was not the peaceful first year of homeownership I had imagined, but it taught me valuable lessons about courage, documentation, and the importance of a functional community. And in the end, justice prevailed. Sometimes, when you stand your ground against someone abusing their power, you do not just help yourself. You help everyone around you who was too afraid to stand up. That is worth all the broken windows and sleepless nights.